Welcome to Deep Thought. The mindset of many people match their social class. And you know, I always like talking about social class and everything. And you know, I like talking about mindset too. I'm gonna tell you what, I can tell what general social class someone is in. Well, most people, and I would say 90% of people that I meet, I can tell what social class they're in by what they talk about, what they trying to do. Because, like, let's use a poor person, right? A poor person, their mindset is really about everyday survival. Their mindset might not go beyond the neighborhood they're living in. You know, they might see like, I don't know, $2,000 as a lot of money. They might like, wow, that's a lot of money, you know? Or $5,000 as a lot of money. And they're like, yeah, you know? And, you know, they'll talk about it in those ways. And, you know, just basic survival. You know, I ain't judging them. But then that's where their mindset is. But then if I were to talk with someone who's upper class, you know, they might be like, 5,000, shoot, that's a week. Shoot, that's a bad month for me, you know. You know, as you get up, you know, that same 5,000 don't mean as much. You know, their mindset is like traveling around and everything. You know, in fact, personally, my mindset is like 5,000. Shoot, if I, that's a really bad month for me, a really bad month for me. You know, so if I'm even talking about it, I'm like, okay, whatever, you know. But then there's someone even higher than that. They like 5,000. I'll be getting that in an hour. You know, but it reflects it because it reflects how they look at people. It reflects the things they like, what they complaining about, whatever, you know? Like, I remember when I was out in San Diego, out on the West Coast, went to, you know, because, you know, I like going to malls and everything. And I was checking out this one store and they had like regular sweaters. They were like $1,000 and everything. But the people who shop there would pay for them, but they would have that mindset. Meanwhile, somebody with more of a poor mindset, they probably wouldn't shop there. And then it really goes deeper. When you talk about classes, it goes deeper into consciousness, either an abundance consciousness or a poverty consciousness. You know, that's how they're going to think because, you know, it's going to match their social class because it's how far they can go. Like you have people in a poor neighborhood, they tend not to save money. The money they're spending is just everyday survival, like I said. They'll spend money. In fact, you have some corporations, some economic theys who you notice they got certain businesses in those neighborhoods just to get those money, just to get that money because they know the mindset is not to save their money, right? Meanwhile, you won't find those same businesses in a rich area because they already know, the corporations already know they're not going to make that money, right? But it still come down to social class, whether it's a poor class or working class, you know, upper middle class, upper class, rich class, the wealthy class. And yeah, those are different. Like someone could be rich, but not wealthy. And you know, someone wealthy is way beyond that, you know? Someone wealthy has the money working for them. Someone rich, they make a lot of money, but they still gotta work for it, you know? It's so many differences, and when you talk to them, it's different. When I talk with anybody, because, you know, I mentioned one of the reasons I have an interest in social class is because how I grew up. I grew up around the poor, very poor in Anacostia, you know, in Anacostia, DC, Southeast DC. But then, you know, my grandparents, they were a little bit higher up. And then I started to see something different when I went to high school, went to a private high school. I was like, oh, okay. You know, and I started seeing the difference in how people were thinking, how they would dress, you know, what would be a big deal. In fact, I remember, like I said, that mindset about someone getting $5,000. I say 2,000, but you know where the 5,000 come from, but we ain't gonna get into political discussions. Like I said, for me, that's nothing, but for somebody else, that might be like a payday to be the payday, right? And you got some people in some of those poor areas, they looking for their money too. They're like, oh yeah. But, and when I say that, understand that's still not 100%. Because you get some people, because there have been some self-made billionaires who've come from a poor environment. I'm thinking about one, I can't think of his name. I can't think of his name, but I saw him on one of those reality shows. You know, I think it was an undercover billionaire. And this guy, he had started off in a very poor, like dysfunctional environment and managed to get rich. But see, he had a different mindset. So you do have some people who don't match it. You could have someone who's in a poor environment, but yet they're very intelligent and they'll do everything they can to move up. But unfortunately, most people, they will stick where they are. That's why if you can talk with them, you start learning the environments, you start talking with different people, you start seeing it's like, oh, okay, all right. You know what they're into, what they following, everything, education level, everything, right? But, and that's why I say many people, like I said, there's always an exception, but for the most part, I would say 95% of people, whatever they talk about, you can tell right away what their class is. You know, if you're talking about somebody talking like, well, just working that good 9 to 5 and everything, yeah, probably working class. But you get somebody talking about, okay, well, creating some businesses or, you know, creating a business where they can make a lot of money or doing something, probably upper middle class. You know, you're talking about somebody wealthy, shoot, like I said, their money working for them. And they're all going to talk different ways about a $5,000. You know, shoot, wealthy, someone wealthy, they say 5,000. Shoot, I'll give that to charity. I give that to a homeless person or something. But it's a reality, because when we're in different social classes, one thing to remember with it is it affects our mindset, because we can always, most people are going to only go as far as their money will take them. Remember, money isn't everything, but it's up there with oxygen. It's a tool, you know? You can't really, if you have a family and they have just, children of regular intelligence, they probably won't get that. They probably wouldn't be able to like send a child to that private school. They probably wouldn't be able to. They would have to send them to a regular school. Probably can't buy them all the latest stuff. So people will start thinking along those terms. Like I said, there's always exceptions, but it's just a reality. Something to think about. In fact, let me just say this, sociologists, when they looking at social classes and stuff, they will tell you there's different cultures within each one. And a culture really goes to a mindset, how someone's thinking, all right? So anyway, that's all I have for today. Think on this, all right? And you know how I do. I just throw out stuff for you to think about. So anyway, I'll get back with y'all. Peace and blessings.